Welcome to the first episode of Blind Shovel, an arts and music podcast. The first guest I had on is an old friend, Jesse Fillingham. He's a very precise and delicate illustrator and a new father. And we talk about that experience. Hope you enjoy. I figure when I talk to people on the phone, it usually is about an hour and is usually interesting. So that's how I'm starting. But with you, the main thing is the fatherhood thing.
Yeah.
Because I find so little information on that. And we'll talk about why I think that is. But it's kind of shocking to me that it's not a more important discussion because it's a pretty confusing one compared to a normal person making that decision. I feel like the variables are quite more complex in terms of like need for focused time and an interior life. But how you been anyway?
Pretty good. I mean, good. And what's up?
Are you exhausted?
Well, I'm back on the coffee, so that's helping. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely more a factor now than it was when he was first born, actually. But yeah, it's just one of the many challenges of raising a kid is they need to learn how to sleep. So yeah, that's complicating things, obviously.
Yeah, how old is he?
But not. He's 6 months.
6 months. And you plan on having more kids?
Not sure. I mean, that's a kind of something we've been talking about a little bit recently because, there's a tight window to have another kid in terms of just age. So, yeah, we're trying to figure that out now. So if we do, it'll be probably, maybe trying again in springtime or something. So
you're not horrified by the experience. You're willing to do it again.
I think I would be. I mean, it's more of a logistical consideration than anything else at this point. I think which includes money, obviously.
Right.
Which, well, I guess it might all come back to money, money and time, because we have a situation now where we're figuring it out with our work schedules and some family helping out, but then, so we're not paying for any childcare yet, but we will be eventually, and that's expensive. And then add another one in the mix. It's just, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, when you were making the decision to have kids, were you thinking about yourself as a normal person or as an artist? I think that distinction matters, at least in my calculations, it matters.
That's a good question. Probably more of the normal person was the consideration, because if I was like thinking about the art specifically, I would have probably balked a bit more, but I think that also might be indicative of how, art is in some ways kind of more on the back burner these days, and it had been starting in the pandemic. So, yeah, but I think I've said this to my wife before that, like, if money wasn't a hurdle, probably would have had kids much earlier. And not that it's not now, it's just, time became a factor. So,
because you're how old?
I'm 36, and
okay.
Yeah, my wife's 35, soon to be 36. So we're getting up there. It's considered a geriatric pregnancy, even though they don't use
They
that
don't.
terminology. They don't anymore, but that's a
I like
recent
that.
change.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, I still use it because it's fantastic. But no,
So
it's a,
do you walk around at this point thinking of yourself as a normal person more than an artist? As a commoner?
I mean, I feel like I've always it vacillates between feeling that way and not. So I feel like I'm a common man, but uh, yeah, I've got some different wrinkles than other people, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I think about in your situation is that you work so slowly,
Yes,
and I just imagine everything you draw takes a long time,
it does.
and that sucks because I imagine that's the one thing you're not getting a lot of right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, actually, yeah, everything does take a long time. That's been like kind of an issue I've had with my work for a few years now, and I've wanted to kind of address it, but I keep getting reeled back in by rendering and just preferring to do that kind of work. But what takes me the longest these days, at least the past few years, and maybe even my whole time making art in my life, is just figuring out what to do is the hardest part in a lot of ways. And once I have something figured out, I can just pop on and steal time here or there, stay up a little bit and just work on things, which is great. Just having something I can uh, just sit down and immediately start working on. But the ideation phase has always been the trickiest part for me, and that's probably what suffered the most with my son being around. Is I usually need a lot of time for that, like more time than is I'd like to admit, to come up with ideas. So I can only, most days, just steal 30 or 40 minutes here or there, which isn't nearly enough to kind of get into the zone.
Yeah, so you're not overwhelmed with ideas.
But, no, I wish I was.
And do you ever consider using other people's ideas? And, like adapting a book or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about that because I am a big fan of, mythology and, speculative fiction and things like that. So I have thought about adapting some work just to kind of expedite the process a bit, but just haven't gotten there yet. But yeah, maybe I should start leaning into that these days.
Yeah, I mean, as I think about children, the most organic thing I can imagine is making kids' books for them as they, maybe different stages of their growth.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the only way to have them and keep making art in a conceptually consistent way. Like making little toys for them or integrating them into your life. I just try to imagine separating the two, and maybe like Miyazaki, and it just seems like a horrible thing to do.
I don't know. I mean, I don't really view it as well, where I'm at right now, at least. I don't really view it as a binary. I feel like they are kind of separate worlds right now. Maybe when he's older and more interested and able to, ask me about what I'm doing and show some interest, I might feel differently. But yeah, right now it doesn't feel like it's an either or situation. Like, I mean, I guess, but then there's Tolkien with The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings were written for his kids, in large part, which is pretty amazing.
That's what I mean. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think Alice in Wonderland was written for, I don't know if that was his child, but something similar like that. Not like a concerted careerist move. It was just an organic shift. And I mean, it's interesting because in punk music, it's often like the worst thing that can happen is they have kids. The lead singer is a kid. It's interesting to consider where it works, where it doesn't. I mean, punk is so
it's very
angsty,
it's got a specific energy. Yeah, that I could see it would kind of mellow some people out.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think. How long have you worked for James Jean?
In total, it's, let's see, in total, 6.5 years, roughly.
Has that inspired you in respect to what art can do, or done the opposite?
Oh man, here's some sticky territory.
Yeah, you don't have to answer that, I guess.
I mean, no,
I suppose we could make it vague and abstract. It seems to me that when someone works full time orbiting around another artist or around art handling, it isn't always the most inspiring or conducive to making your own art.
No, yeah, it's been pretty. Yeah, it's not. It doesn't. It doesn't actively inspire me. That's for sure. I mean, but it also. Um, I'm not doing creative work at all. I'm pretty much just a wrist that knows how to paint and draw and work in Photoshop. So it's not kind of exhausting my creative drive when I'm off the clock, which is great. Where if I was having to come up with concepts or, backgrounds or whatever, it would probably drain me quite a bit more than my current job does. So
that makes sense.
Yeah. So don't feel when I come home and I have some time to work, my problems are my own. It's not derived from the day job at all.
Yeah.
So, to answer your question, the career of the artist I work for is inspiring just to see how much success you can have outside of traditional path in the art world. But on the same hand, I see what it takes to get there, and to can recognize it's not for me, and then I'm fine with that. It's just the grind is real.
Right.
So, yeah.
I think it's interesting to consider, since we first met, the way we both might view art making or illustration at this point. At least for me, I know from a young age, I thought making art meant you just made stuff that ended up in a museum. And I had no other examples. I didn't really know any professional artists or designers. Yeah. So that was the assumption for me. But over time, I became clearer as to which thing I didn't want to do, and how open the idea of being an artist could be. So I'm kind of curious from your perspective, from Icon, the illustration conference, forward, how has your identity changed around that label? I mean, like you said earlier, it doesn't sound like it's a major part of your identity. You're not walking around the streets of LA thinking of yourself as an artist.
Well, I am and I'm not, because I'm, imposter syndrome is real. And I also have a lot of issues that I probably still need to work out around disliking most of my work while also being really proud of it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think I didn't really know. I didn't know what being an artist meant either. I just liked comics when I was younger, and then somehow learned about illustration and just, sure, I'll try that out, and kind of like bumbled my way through. Like, I wasn't very informed as to how to have a career in the art world or illustrate. Even though I got a degree in illustration, I still didn't really understand what that meant. And I think as I went through school, it was less and less appealing to me. And I still have some ambivalent feelings about it. Like, on one hand, I'm like, oh, you can make money if you just put your work out there, more like knock on people's doors, advertise. But on the other hand, I'm like, I'd rather just make my own stuff. I have no real interest in making commissioned work, but I don't know if that's a fear-based feeling or just actually how I feel about making artwork at this point, because I have enjoyed plenty of commissioned work, but there is a lot of trepidation around it for me for whatever reason. More issues that would probably benefit me to have ironed out a little bit.
Well, you get good commissioned work. You get mostly music related things, which can be a pain in the ass and not pay much, but at least the product tends to be far more interesting than editorial illustration. And if I recall correctly, your senior thesis of illustration didn't even strike me as illustration. It struck me as art, or maybe that's your school, where it's like, at least the school I went to, it's very clear that people were doing assignments as their senior thesis.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely a school thing. At least the instructors I gravitated towards emphasized personal work over commissioned work in a big way, which was very liberating and inspiring, but kind of broke me at the same time. Not that I would have had a successful career otherwise in the editorial world, but I'm really grateful for it. But kind of that's what I prefer to do at this point, which can pigeonhole you. But to your point about the music and record covers, that's an industry where you can look at someone like Robert Beatty, and from the outside it looks amazing, and he's got kind of the dream career for illustration, but I'm sure there's plenty of records that are slogs. I guess that's just life, though. Not everything.
Yes.
Bubblegum and lollipops.
Nothing good is, at least.
Yeah.
I guess I asked because when I think about the topic of fatherhood as being an artist, it's interesting to consider what one is willing to sacrifice and what it is they're sacrificing. So if you were going full on career mode and your art was sustaining everything, you weren't working for James Jean, you would have to sacrifice. I don't know. It's an interesting, as I get older, I think I become far less attached to certain concepts of being an artist. And there is some shame around that, I think, because 10 years ago, I thought I needed art to be alive. And that probably made for better art, if I'm being frank. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I don't know that I've ever, well, maybe I have felt that way.
High school, maybe?
No, not high school at all. I mean, no. I mean, I was the doodler. I never really made stuff consistently until I started taking classes. And yeah, no, I don't know.
You think it would bother you if you made one drawing a year, but you had a good family?
Me in January 2023. Yeah, I mean, yes, it would, and maybe I'll try to make 5 pieces a year. I mean, that's pushing it this year, which is a big asterisk because it's first year of life, really figuring things out. But no, I mean, I've kind of been wrestling with that recently because the productivity is so low, and I have for the past few years felt like I'm all out of juice. I don't feel inspired all that often these days. So I have started kind of mulling over the potential of not making art as just a kind of a thought experiment. And because there's also the pressures of posting and making art for pats on the head and things like that, the ego, which I'm trying to separate from my own work as well. And yeah, I'm not sure if I need to make art. I'm trying to narrow down why I make art these days, I guess.
Yeah, same.
Because it's not. Yeah. It's not for any huge audience. I'm not making much money at all from it. But I keep trying, banging my head against that wall. So I think I would I don't think I would love the idea of making a piece a year unless it was some incredibly elaborate piece that I was really proud of. But I'd like to be making a bit more than that on my own modest scale.
Yeah, that's that compartmentalization. It's kind of what I was talking about earlier, where if you can integrate it, you find much more purpose. For instance, if you were making a kid's book for your kid when they were 5, there would be so much more fuel than making it for its own sake.
Yeah.
And as you're talking about separating out the audience in some sense, although conflating it with ego, which I think makes some sense, but also it's important to have a social clique that you care somewhat about. I feel like I've lost that, at least digitally. I have it locally, but the quality of those artists locally is lower. But I feel that compartmentalizing that stuff and removing that stuff cynically sometimes has the reverse effect of just not giving you any fuel. Even if the fuels are shallow in the beginning, you just want to be liked or have more followers. I think that if handled correctly, they can be converted into the correct orientation. But if you strip it all out, you might have no reason to make it anymore.
I think you just nailed it in terms of where I was at recently. I hadn't posted in quite a long time and kind of stopped thinking about Instagram and was quite frustrated with the platform and kind of just stopped caring about it. And I think it did affect me in a negative way because I don't have a huge local clique either of like-minded artists that I talk to or hang out with. So yeah, I think it kind of just the practice kind of started, withering away a bit, which is probably a factor, but
yeah, we're not so pure in the end. Like just to have the incentive to make it for itself seems ideal. But
I mean, I knew I was never pure because I do need people. I do need praise for sure. It feels good. It helps. I like sharing that.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that's fine. That's not an impurity per se. I don't think. It's kind of just about having the right audience that feeds back into the work correctly.
Yeah.
If it's arbitrary likes from unknown people, that's probably not necessarily the correct audience. But at this age, I'm sure around you as well, at least a lot of my friends in LA, the natural branching, albeit they try very hard not to grow up, the natural branching of life and circumstances just, tearing them apart. And that's the thing I miss about school. School, that's its primary function, is just having people around to make work with and bounce off of each other.
Yeah.
Or like I used to care about the comics scene, and I sincerely don't. And I feel like I've aged, like I'm very old because of the rate at which things change, and maybe that's the truth of it. If we didn't develop that niche strongly digitally, social media in that sense, maybe it's over for us.
I think it might be.
I'm completely fine with that because I've so many other things I want to do. That identity is fading, and once you don't worship the algorithm for like 3 years, it's not going to suddenly reward you.
No, it's and the hoops you have to jump through at this point are so elaborate that even if you got back into it, it's you just be treading water at that point. So it doesn't matter. Like Instagram's an absurd platform at this point, sadly, because it was pretty amazing for a while.
I mean, that's the Tumblr story. I only had so much energy to dedicate to these platforms, and I chose Tumblr, and I chose wrong, apparently. And
I mean, we're all wrong in the end.
Yes, but I don't want to get all relative about it. its lifespan was certainly shorter,
Yeah.
and translating that currency was ineffective for me. But that can be a liberating thing. I think it's just about finding new anchors that are maybe realer, and that's the thing I could see that might be cool about having a family and kids. Obviously, it embeds purpose in your life and meaning. But the question for me is, what does it do to the art process? And I've asked a lot of artists, and that's something I do want to focus on, because you do often read about these great artists who are just horrible at everything else.
Yeah.
I don't think of. Can you think of a single artist who, I mean, it stands out as a good parent? I don't know why we would know that information, but I feel
I was going to say, there's people that I'd like to think were good parents, but like Gene Wolfe, the writer, but he may not have been.
Why do you like to think he's a good parent?
Well, okay, maybe I don't know. I think about it right before I sleep every night, and it helps me get cozy. And
yeah,
no, Michael.
You know that he has kids, obviously, or had kids.
Yeah, he has had multiple kids and worked full time before. And he wasn't published till he was in his 40s, and worked full time and got up early every morning to write. So he was supporting his family.
That's insane.
And he recommended that for writers as well. Just have a full-time job, because the time you have to work is that much more precious. So you get much more done than, kind of the writer staring out the window, daydreaming and going on long walks. But which I can see the truth in that, but also, sometimes you need some more time. But I don't know.
I mean, that is the argument for kids making you a better artist that I hear, is that time becomes this.
Yeah.
There's no fucking around. It's just, But I can't imagine in the first 2 years it's like that at all.
No, I mean, it could be like that, but it's still figuring it out at this point. But
and you're lamenting your coffee use. Is that something you struggle with?
No, I'm not. It's not. No, I mean, I don't. Maybe I was projecting some coffee judgment onto you, but no, I'm not lamenting it. It's fucking fantastic right now. But I did go off of it for right before he was born, and wasn't drinking any coffee for a bit. But I'm back, baby. It's helpful.
Nice.
But yeah.
So it sounds like you don't have any things on the horizon art-wise that are exciting to you right now.
No, I mean, I had just recently started a new piece, which I'm excited about. It's another graphite rendering with, acrylic, airbrush background. And I'm doing a t-shirt design right now that I've been, struggling with, but maybe getting somewhere with that as well. So there's a couple things that are nice. Popping up, but I've always got little plans for things and half starts, but yeah, I'm quite slow, as you said.
No, yeah, I'm looking through the Instagram right now. It's looking good. But you would say inspirationally, you're just exhausted, right? I mean, that seems like something that happens in your 30s. It's almost as if we've taken in too much, too fast, too disparately. I don't think it's weird to be inspired. Like, for instance, I'm sure Gene Wolfe is a huge inspiration. I don't think there's anything odd about being inspired by 2-3 different artists, and that's it. I think there's something far stranger about being inspired by 1,000 single images from artists you might not even know.
Yeah, I mean I could see that for sure. But yeah, because I mean, I do have a folder and this might be an unhealthy habit of just like an inspiration folder that I, add to all the time. And it's as varied as you could imagine. which is exciting and inspiring, but then it does kind of pull me in many different directions because there's so many potential avenues that I feel like my art could go in and things I could try, that it just kind of halts all progress. You just, get stuck because there's almost too much opportunity, potential.
Yeah, I mean, I think every artist thinks their work isn't very consistent, but your work is very consistent. So I don't sense that being pulled in many directions thing.
Well, it's because I just don't make much.
Well, when you do, it's very consistent.
Yeah,
it's very clear.
I suppose so.
And you bring digital processes in only to finish, it looks like.
It depends on the project. I enjoy playing around with stuff digitally, but for some of the originals I make, obviously there's no digital work, but for a record cover, there could be, there usually is, or things of that nature, just commissioned work, or other digital stuff might just be experimental, just starting and finishing a whole piece digitally.
Right. Yeah, no, I think I prefer when I can tell it's primarily not digital, the work you do.
Yeah, you have for whatever reason, my little digital thumbprint is repulsive to you.
Yeah, there's something about the colors. It's such an unrestrained world. Any color you want, at any time, anywhere. I think it can bring out the worst often.
Yeah, I feel like I've never been great at colors for whatever reason. So maybe there might be something to that. But I all the stuff I've posted that's digital, I like.
Well, I could see you probably had more fun.
Sometimes, I mean, often, well, with digital work, it can be quite frustrating because I don't feel like I have a well-worn path in terms of process for it. So I'm just kind of fumbling around. But for like graphite drawings or some of the toned paper and charcoal pieces, it's a pretty clear path that I follow. And there's very rigid orders of things that can happen and when they can happen, that it's almost easier in some ways to work on an analog piece than digitally.
Interesting. Do you find it? Do you enjoy making the work?
I do. I mean, I dislike. Well, I don't dislike. It's the first half of the process is quite painful usually, which is ideation and sketching. I feel like I've just gotten worse and worse at drawing. I mean, I look back at my work and that's definitely not true. I just think my tastes have changed. So I spend more time refining things than I did before, for better or worse. But I do feel like I can't draw as well as I did in school, which I'm sure is true. So the ideation takes a long time, which tied to that is like the reason why am I making this? And I think too much probably about how the viewer will respond to it. I have a million little critics in my brain, but then so the sketch phase takes a while as well, and that's painful. But then once all that's figured out, it's usually quite enjoyable. Just the rendering, noodling stages, therapeutic in a way.
Yeah, I think that's important to know how not enjoyable the majority of making art is.
It's brutal for me, at least. It's awful.
Which probably means you'll be a good parent, because I think the people who suffer with having children are the people who try to avoid suffering, because it doesn't sound fun to have a
lot of it isn't.
Yeah, most of it is probably horrible. like anything worth doing. I mean, I think that's the hard thing about contemplating it for me. I mean, I'm not a hedonist, so thankfully, but I feel like hedonists don't do well with it because it's most of the time not pleasurable.
Yeah, but I mean the highs you get are, higher than most other highs you get in life. And I mean, listen, it's only 6 months, but like it can be pretty amazing. But yeah, those are fleeting moments, and a lot of it is, anxiety, stress, frustration, all those things. But
what are those amazing moments? Just
him, laughing, figuring things out. Yeah, just interaction. So the first, I don't know, couple months were pretty rough for me and for fathers. So in general, a lot of times because you can't bond with this thing because your child has no idea where they are. They're not engaging at all. And so you're just there. The mother bonds with breastfeeding, feeding. They carried them. So it's a whole different ball game with them. But yeah, so now that he's kind of developing a personality and you can engage with him a bit more, it's quite fun when he's open to it and in a good mood.
So you're just being ignored for the first 2 weeks?
For months, really. Yeah, no,
months,
they can't even really like see you yet. Like their eyes are open, but their vision isn't great for a while. Then you can try to make them laugh as much as you want, and it's quite difficult. Maybe not 2 months. I have to go back and look at photos to really remember, but it feels like a long time where they're just kind of just this helpless little bag of flesh that is not really. They just eat. They're eating and pooping machines for quite a while.
And you're just sitting around waiting for that attention in some ways.
Yeah, in some ways,
some connection.
Because it's like, yeah, because that makes it worthwhile, or more worthwhile is when obviously there's some feeling involved. Whereas for a while it was just like, yeah, I guess this is my kid, or did somebody just drop this thing off? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just this being is here now. Like, I don't know what's going on. So, yeah.
Did you imagine having kids your whole life?
No, not at all. But I wasn't averse to the thought of it. I wasn't someone that was like, I'm definitely going to have kids. It was kind of a question mark for a while. And I don't know, that could just be a career path thing. Like maybe if I was some finance guy, I would have made the decision much sooner to have kids. But yeah, no, it wasn't. I was always quite nervous about it for obvious reasons. Such a huge lifestyle change, and yeah, the money, the stress, all that comes with it was quite daunting to me. I
mean, you were already a dad in some ways, right?
You mean like a zaddy?
I don't know what that is, but the lifestyle change isn't that dramatic, is it?
Well, no. I mean, yeah, you're right. We're kind of.
What are you doing?
I'm just partying a lot, Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, it wasn't a huge life, but there is a lifestyle change in the sense that like you can't just let's go do this weekend or whatever. Like you're much more restricted, and the few times we foray out into the world are you have to consider them much more than we used to.
Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, you're right. No, we weren't. It's not as big of a lifestyle change as it would be for most people, probably. Or many people, that is.
Was there someone who inspired you to have children? I suppose your wife.
Yeah, no, nothing specific beyond just the idea of having a family was, sounded nice, but also, yeah, quite ambivalent feelings.
Were you researching like me, artists who have had kids, or people who have accomplished things who have kids?
No.
I'll just look up basically anyone and see how many kids they've had.
I'm not as ambitious as you, I guess.
Anyone who has done something remarkable and has kids.
Yeah, I have not. I didn't consider that at all. Actually, that's quite telling. But no, I did not.
Do you know any artists personally with kids?
Yeah, well, one of my friends who I went to school with works in animation. He has two kids, but I don't really see him much. He's lives in the OC, Orange County, but I think, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it outside of my boss and just more acquaintance type people online.
Yeah, I was trying to figure that out. If it's just that artists are tremendously immature and they have a really good excuse for being so, which I think is true, or if they're getting like a little hit off of that generative thing and they don't need to make life because they make things all the time.
I think it's much simpler. I mean, maybe some of the immaturity angle, maybe, but I think just the financial angle has got to be, I would imagine, is the biggest for most people or most artists. But
I'm just going to disagree with that.
Interesting.
I don't think so. A lot of artists I know, I can't even imagine them being responsible for another person in any way. And if you think about the process of most art making, it's so solitary and egocentric and it requires a large chunk of time in which you're uninterrupted. I just don't think they mesh well for most people.
Yeah.
And I really do think artists are deeply irresponsible and immature. And that's mostly learned from dating them and running a gallery. So I feel like
you've got some authority on that.
Yeah, and yeah. I don't think it's shocking in any way.
No, you're right. When I think about the people I know that, yeah, people I went to school with or other people I've met over the years, you're not wrong.
I mean, first of all, it's also mental stability. You know, you're stable, and I could see you having kids. There's maybe I could probably count them on my hand, artists I know who I think could have kids and raise them well. Whether they could continue to make the art is a different question.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
that's the interesting one to me.
Yeah, I guess time will tell, for me at least. I think I will, in a small way, for
I think you will
a while more at least. But I think I love it. I love art and stories and like fiction and mythology too much to not want to participate in that in a small way, in my own way. But yeah, we'll see. It is. But I was having these issues even before my son was here, so it's just, yeah, there's definitely just something I'm going through. Maybe there's a little midlife crisis happening, but
I think he's going to inspire you to make more art. That's my guess.
That would be amazing. I mean, it's hard to imagine, but that would be nice.
And his name is Silas?
Silas, yes.
And how do you arrive at that name?
Well, it's actually a name my wife has liked for a while. I can't remember. It took us a bit to get to it, actually, but I can't remember who brought it up. I think she probably brought it up first, but then, oh, you know what? No, here we go. I think we're thinking of a different name in Sylvan, or that's something that I liked the idea of. But which is kind of related to, like, you know, the Roman, like, foresty, woody god. Something, yeah, a little more rural vibe. But then there's these things called Sylvan Learning Centers, which I wasn't even aware
yes.
of. But yeah, I didn't know what those were, but it's like, okay, that name's out. And so Silas is a version of that because it's related to Silenus or Sylvanus. So not Silenus, Sylvanus, which is a Roman God of the
I see
Woods
that. I
type.
see that. I'm looking that up. That's nice. That fits nicely into what you do. And it also makes me think, have you seen The Green Knight?
I have.
It seems that, at least visually, you must love that film.
Yes, it was spectacular, visually. I sadly read the poem before the movie came out because I was pretty excited for it, and I should know better because I'm a terrible person to watch a movie with if I've read the source material because I'm rarely happy. So
really, you have like a fidelity thing where you're like, why is that not the same as it was when it was written?
sadly, I do.
How odd.
I know it's pretty terrible. I mean, it's not like I'm not a stickler about things, but it just if I'm expecting things, I think this is the bigger issue. If I'm expecting certain things to happen, or I have this shape of the story in the back of my head while I'm watching something, and it starts subverting that, it's distracting to me. I think to where if I had no awareness of the source material, I could just sit and absorb it and enjoy it more and not be in my head as much, which is, I think that's the main issue. Is not so much being a stickler about maintaining the sanctity of the text or anything. So
yeah, you're comparing instead of just watching something.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very different. I enjoyed it. I did not read the poem. I think it had pacing issues, but the upside, the visuals, the sounds of the Green Knight walking and talking, those are unforgettable things.
Yeah, there's some great moments.
But I know you like the Green Man, so he definitely has a Green Man.
Yeah, it's related
thing going on.
Yeah,
is it?
For sure.
Is it?
I think so. I mean, I'm no expert, but I know green men were in England or in monasteries and things, and they were kind of squirreled away in churches, and they're just nature spirits. I don't think there's a whole lot of like texts about them, but or folklore surrounding them, but yeah, I think it's got to be related.
Yeah, I don't know much about the Green Men, but I think we had discussed it a while back.
Green Men?
Yeah.
There's a fun different varieties. I can't remember the terminology, but where if there's flora sprouting from the mouth, they're this type, or from the eyes, or from the nose. There's like different flavors of Green Man, which is fun. But yeah, I think they just represent nature and seasons, renewal, change, all that type of stuff. But yeah,
you'll find this symbols of the past aren't trying to do that much, which is why they're potent. Like it could just be, it just represents spring or green or forests, and then it's just visually stacked on top of that. It doesn't have like 15 conceptual facets that are all interwoven.
Right. Or like bull's horns look like crescent moon. So, which is, it's dumbing it down, but it's potent in that way, I guess.
I don't know if it's dumbing it down. It's just more.
The way I said it is dumbing it down.
Yeah. You can feel it without any explanation.
Yeah. I mean, I love symbols. I've got, some books on it. And that's some of my favorite stuff to look at. It's just because it feels potent. It feels like it has meaning in a world these days that feels like, so much is stripped of all meaning. It kind of feels cozy to look at some texts or symbols that, you can read exactly how they were viewed in olden times.
Yeah, it's pretty horrific how meaningless. I mean, I have my theories about what has caused that. Largely a scientific materialist framework for viewing everything in this very dull, meaningless, just kind of atomic way. And then that's why the question of having a child is so perplexing for most modern people, because if they're honest, and most of them are not, but the narrative they say is it's just another meat sack, or it's just flesh. From a materialist perspective, it doesn't make sense. Why would you struggle to make another flesh sack that's going to make your life less enjoyable? And that's how people talk about it. It's incredible how discouraging people are about the fundamental act of life and the only reason that you or I exist. So I think there's something strangely subversive that shouldn't be about having a child. And you are strangely subversive in how steady you are as a individual who is an artist. And I find those people very interesting, because you dated for 12 years before getting married?
More, but we don't need to go there. Yeah. A long time.
Yeah. Finally, Fillingham.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I didn't appreciate that jab. That's not the time.
It wasn't. I appreciate how defensive.
I am defensive.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You got my back, but I really didn't see the barb in that dumb little hashtag that you did until it was brought to my attention. Really,
Oh, it's really, there. You're not looking for it. It's
more self-deprecating. Because I was
you made that?
I may have. I don't even remember. I mean, it's alliterative, it's fun, but yeah. I mean, it kind of was finally, because it's just like we dated for like 15 years. So yeah,
this is the true anomaly amongst the artists. These people I'm seeking out more and more, because the artist stereotype is so boring. It's largely performative, and I think largely infantile at this point. There was probably a time where being, really open and chaotic and sexually liberated and amoral was a subversive and deeply interesting thing to be. But that's most people now. Or
at least most people that you're bumping into and seeing online, because there's a huge swath of people in this country that are still very,
I should say artists.
Yeah. Okay.
Artists specifically.
Sure. Yeah.
I think it's a luxury identity. I mean, it obviously is a luxury identity from a lot of perspectives, but there's more and more artists. There must be more artists than ever. And there seems to be, most of them are obviously not artists, but you know what I mean? There's more people in that position pretending to be artists, I believe, because of what the identity allows for. And that's kind of what I'm getting at is you get leeway with it far more than you should. And I've certainly taken liberties with it in my life, but I don't think you have. And I respect that.
I guess it's not in my personality, but, yeah, I don't know. It wasn't a conscious choice, just who I am, I guess.
Yeah, but you see how that your identity is at odds with the typical.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can see that.
Which ironically drives you away from. I think it inevitably drives you away from the masses of the artists, the scenes, etc. Because it's less relatable. And we all know the best artists are not in the middle of the scene, ever. I've never met a good artist who didn't exist on the outside fringe of the circle.
Interesting. I mean, yeah, I haven't really thought about that, but I'll take your word for it.
I mean, I'm just saying I haven't.
Yeah.
They all have the same propensity. It's as if they're embodying the same principle that they want to exist on the outside of a category or form, and just kind of observe it and do their own thing, but not be kind of pulled into the center of the thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which makes for some strange personalities. Absolutely. But what I'm trying to definitely figure out, and this brings it up in my mind, is I'm kind of interested right now in conservative behaving artists, and I would put having children in that category. I'm not talking about political. I'm talking about behavioral.
Yeah,
because it's far more interesting when someone is responsible and put together, and I think mature and self-sacrificing, and they can also enter the shadow realm of creativity and when they open that door, they're not completely falling apart psychically.
Yeah, I think that's what I was so inspired by, or the reason I was so inspired by Gene Wolfe is just, I mean, there's plenty of other writers like that, but he was just a focus of mine for a while. Was just how, I mean, he was converted to Catholicism to marry his wife. So he was probably politically conservative as well, but yeah, just how stable and normal he seemed while creating some amazing works of art at the same time was interesting to me. Like, you don't need to be some bohemian gallivanting around to create meaningful work, and that was definitely inspiring for me as someone who could relate to how as you said, just kind of a little bit of a homebody, stable for the most part.
Yeah, for me, it's an economic concern, right? Like there is an exhaustive and excessive amount of politically liberal and behavior and morally liberal artists, and they're frankly very boring over time. They're predictable in their unpredictable natures, and it seems logical that it would follow if you're a mess and you can't keep an appointment, like I failed to do several times for this podcast, that you would also make art, and that's the stereotype. But it also seems to me pretty clear that in your 30s, most of those people have been weeded out as completely unprofessional.
I was gonna say, art takes so much discipline that you can't really have it both ways. There's just no way around that. There's no shortcut there at all.
And that's what school should have been teaching. And my school was pretty good about that. It's not what I was looking for at the time, I don't think, but I was too immature to pick it up. But you need a serious scaffolding mentally to deal with the power of what you're unleashing. If you're dealing with anything powerful, obviously a lot of art is just superficial fluff, but when you get into the deeper stuff, I think you need a really strong structure. Now, go ahead.
Well, just the school I went to definitely was known, kind of known as like a somewhat corporate school, which soon after graduating kind of longed for a more kind of open, interesting, kind of maybe a little more party atmosphere for a school. But the school I went to is probably suited me more anyways.
Yeah.
Quite serious, quite structured and intense.
I think most art schools are more than non-artists realize. And they're always shocked by you're in class for 8 hours, and if you miss 3 classes, you fail automatically. Of course, this wasn't true because they need to get money off the kids who suck. Anyways. Yeah. And you got to crit those kids and whatnot. But yeah, this is where I'm going. This is where I'm interested in, is what does an artist look like in their 30s and 40s? Since there seems to be such a fixation with youth and party artists, which again is just not interesting to me. But what does it look like when they start maturing? Because one of the questions I ask myself very often is, what does a mature artist look like? Because so much of what we associate with making art is conflated in my mind with immaturity. So you should be childlike or spontaneous. A lot of those things run contrary to having a career as an artist, or even being able to make sustained work as an artist, you know.
I wonder how much of this how much of that type of artist is on your radar because of the scenes you're around. Because I'm thinking of other like niches in the art world, and it doesn't seem like that would hold true. Like the kind of animation, indie comic, alt comic world, I think is probably uniquely kind of immature in that regard.
Well, I think animators need discipline, so I think they're probably more.
Okay, yeah, not animation, but I guess I'm thinking of the indie comic scene in relation to that, because there's definitely a parallel there. But
well, I'm liking the pushback, but I think we just disagree. Like, if we're talking about craftsmen, I find that crafts inspire much more. One, I actually think conservative people, because they're interested in tradition. Typically, they're interested in carrying a tradition. But two, I think they tend to be more down to earth and structured and disciplined, because they're dealing with real material, and it talks back in a very real way. But I find when you're playing with ideas, especially conceptual ideas, or drawing, I don't think it's as strong as wood talking back, or ceramics, where it's almost scientific what you're doing. And it forces you, I think, to have a more mature dialogue with the material.
Yeah, I mean, you have more experience in that world than I do, so couldn't say, but there might be something there. I don't know. I was trying to think while you were talking about artists, about people I admire the most, and if they seem like they're, a little more bohemian or a little more closed. I was just I have to think about that a bit more.
I mean, it's a stereotype, but stereotypes are usually right to a degree, and I don't think it's always been true. I don't think this is like for thousands of years type thing.
Yeah.
But besides Wolfe, who actually still inspires you?
Well, another writer, John Crowley, was up there. Not in the way that Wolfe, like, cause I think Gene Wolfe was just kind of like exploded my brain when I first came across him years ago, which led me eventually to John Crowley. But
Wolfe is your North Star.
He had been. I haven't read any of his stuff in a little bit, but yeah, he definitely was for quite a while. Without question.
Is there a visual artist who's that central, or is that too close to home?
Not as central as Gene Wolfe was, really.
Well, that's smart, because it would be bad to have a visual artist be that central, I think.
There's some that I love quite a lot, but yeah, I think it being a fiction writer, and that helps, because it's a different medium, obviously, and what he does with that medium is just mind blowing to me. When I first read Book of the New Sun, it just my brain had never. What he does with language and description really kind of blew my mind, and all the puzzles in it as well. But yeah, there are some artists that, like Mobius was that for a little bit, but he never really influenced my work in any way, I don't think. Dennis Forkus these days is also someone I like looking at a lot, even though his online presence isn't very strong. I think
You think there's a phase in which you can't ingest influence visually? Because I remember Miyazaki talking about seeing Mobius's work, and although Nausicaa is clearly influenced by him, that I believe the quote is something along the lines of, "I wish I had seen that earlier, so I could have integrated it into my style."
Interesting.
But almost like it's over. I mean, clearly with Miyazaki, the style is so solid that I could get from his perspective, like, oh, I can't change the way I draw, but I could draw a thing that looks, or a world that looks similar, but I'm not going to change the way I draw. So is there in your, it seems like maybe in late 20s, 30s, there's I'm wondering if that's inevitable, that there's this like cap that you have to put on that aspect and allow yourself to be influenced by the content of something else or the world, but not changing your style all the time.
I mean, I think that's where I've been for a while. It's just the content is what interests me. And I look at other artists and get a little envious. I'm like, I wish I could draw like that or what have you. But when I'm actually get down to making something, it's always the content that is what's top of the mind. That's probably why the ideation process takes so long. So yeah, I think for me, that definitely is the case. I don't draw. I don't think I'll be drawing much differently
till you die.
Probably not. There'll be like mediums will change, and yeah, it'll change a bit, but not anything drastic. And I think that would be strange, and if it did, it would feel artificial if it changed in a big way, I think.
Yeah, it almost makes me feel like, I mean, I believe in the soul, but it feels like that to me, where I used to think you could run away from yourself or draw yourself away, and then I would always just return back. I couldn't get away from some gravitational center, which to me suggests it's not just like this performative collection of influences. It's this unavoidable, idiosyncratic person at the base that you just can't get away from. And that's beautiful and good. I think
if you could train that though, like if you, instead of like coming at it from a style angle, if you just started figure drawing a lot, if that would,
yeah, I've thought about that recently. Honestly, I have such a disrespect for figure drawing.
Really, like I wish I had the time to do it, because I feel like that would help me hone up my chops a little bit. But
I don't know. It's just arbitrary wall I built at some point against figure drawing. I want to knock it down. I'm admitting to that, but I had because so much illustration was based around the human form, which it should be. But in college, I always wanted to do the opposite. So I was always trying to draw and communicate things abstractly without showing humans. And so I also just thought there wasn't value in it at some point, which is ridiculous because it's maybe the most valuable thing. And as I become more and more Christian, I understand that the central thing is the human. And that's why all the art is focused on human figures and that expression. So, I mean, it's a good point. I wonder if I sat down and just kept drawing figures and then returned to try to draw comics the way I do now, what would happen?
Yeah, I feel like it would have to be different. And that's less of a style influence and more of just, just like you're working on the foundation of your drawing process. I
mean, do you ever try to draw like someone else? Like you pick a person and draw like them?
Not since college. But
I think you did that to me once, actually. Now that I'm thinking about it.
I did it to you.
Yeah, you sent me a drawing acting as if you were me. It was funny, but it was still clearly you.
What was it?
Oh, it's something vulgar.
Oh, I know what it was. It was for you and Neve. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I stand by those. Those are some of my best work.
Yeah. Look at this. Mobius had 4 kids.
Oh, wow.
And one of them is called Nausicaa.
No way. Wow.
Nausicaa Girard. Wow. See, there's no excuse then. How can
Listen,
there be?
there's always an asterisk next to Mobius. There's no,
you gotta
no compare.
You gotta pretend sometimes that you're 4 kids and he's still doing it like that.
I mean, this dude was working
dude.
in like Hollywood. He was raking in the money, I'm sure. So
it's interesting. You're on the financial tip a lot.
Well, I mean, it's real because like he probably, his wife was probably a homemaker. I'm assuming she stayed at home with the kids, and he brought in the dough with his art. Where right now, I scaled back to part time with a day job, and my wife is working full time, 6 a.m. to 2, and so I'm working nights from 2 to 10 on the days that I work. And her parents are coming up, so I'm working a normal schedule shift that day.
Right.
And the 2 other days in the week, I'm quote unquote, she gets quote unquote off at 2 or around 2 or 3. And then I can technically, for 2 days of the week, have like 3 until whatever to work on my stuff. But, and the weekends, but there's, inevitably just a lot of other things that need to happen in life. So it's a real consideration. So that's money, but which is directly tied to time and how much time you have to work on your art if the art isn't what's bringing in money at all. So it's,
I mean, that's part of my concern with compartmentalizing. And we talked one time for like 2 hours about decompartmentalizing or compartmentalizing. I don't know if you remember that, but,
I don't.
It seems to me that's flattering. It seems to me that
I have a terrible memory, man. It's all the CTE,
Yeah. From football, right?
Yeah.
It seems to me that I'm trying to decompartmentalize more and more. Like I want to be able to make the money with the creative thing I do. I want it to serve my community. I want it to be fulfilling as well. And I think that's completely possible. You just might not end up making, for me, like comic books, And I came to that realization. That was always evident to me. I wasn't going to make money making the comics I make.
Yeah.
But maybe, there's always this suspicion in me that once you develop an identity as a cartoonist or whatever illustrator, there's a fear of undermining that, challenging that because, you'd have to start over, I guess. And it almost feels like cheating on someone also. Like, what if there is something you like more than that? It could still be creative design work or something. But that's largely been my trajectory, realizing like, as a child, I just liked making things and no one makes anything anymore. So they picked me up and said, this is an artist because he draws. But I think in the past, it's very possible I would have just been a carpenter or designer,
Yeah, I mean, I relate to that in a big way and commend you for the effort at decompartmentalizing because it does sound like it would be incredibly fulfilling to be able to serve all those different functions in your life. And I definitely
you lose something for sure. I'm not suggesting you don't lose your idiosyncratic expression at times.
Yeah, I mean, you do, but if you can decompartmentalize and bring a lot of that stuff together, you can still have some time to work on your little idiosyncratic other art practice.
I think the truth is
doing right now.
Yeah, but I think the truth is it starts to lose its allure because it feels like a castrated thing. It feels like one slice of a pizza pie instead of the whole thing. It's just this self-expression, but you could self-express within a far more holistic activity creatively. And that's kind of the rub for me right now. It's like, where there used to feel like a need to make comics. Again, because I think I was just in a much more narcissistic and self-centered place. I was just into myself and horrible at relationships. And I just wanted to sort that out and draw. But as I move beyond it, it's like, it's a little troubling. I'm not going to lie, because it's cool to make comics. And there are a lot of comics I'd like to make. I maybe have a different problem than you. I have maybe too many ideas, and then selecting the proper one can be a problem. But now, as you start to experience these bigger things, it's almost like when you feel that beautiful act of helping another person or being in service of someone else. I'm sure you'll feel that with the child. What it inevitably means is you don't have as much time for your self-centered activities.
Yeah.
Which are less fulfilling, I think, actually, in reality. But as an artist, that sounds almost counterproductive.
Decompartmentalizing sounds counterproductive. Is that?
No, the feeling of what I would consider maturity, which is serving others and feeling the.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
You know what I mean? No, decompartmentalizing is the goal. I think it really is the goal.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that seems so out of reach for me at this point.
It's not. It's not. I mean, my hope is that having a child forces you to. It's obviously going to force you to grow in different ways,
Yeah, I mean, I guess just the art making. I don't think I will ever be like the sole source of income. So I think inevitably it will need to be, if I keep making stuff like I'm making now, I will need to be decompartmentalized a bit, which I've been at peace with for a while. I mean, not fully, because I still wrestle with that and wish I could just, have more of a career with what I do make, but I don't know.
I think you could, but it's an interesting question of if you'd have to curb the. I used to think that way. You'd have to curb or carve away at your idiosyncrasies to be more acceptable. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think that's one approach and not an optimal one. I think the same could be said for maturity or adulthood, that, you could reduce yourself down to your most basic unit to be of service and be acceptable in society. But you're going to lose something integral at that moment. So I think everyone is faced with the same problem. The artist just thinks it's a little more urgent, I think.
Yeah.
But we're exhausted.
Is that the royal were?
Yeah, you exhausted?
Am I exhausted?
I mean, it's good to see that you're not exhausted,
No, I mean, it comes and goes, but for the most part, no, I'm doing all right. But
you think you're going to think you're better than people because you have kids?
I already do.
Yeah, I get. I mean, that's completely valid.
That's not true at all. No, I definitely don't. I mean, no, absolutely not.
You think you're going to think you're wiser than people because you're going to have kids?
No, I know I'm dumb as shit, dude.
I didn't say you were smart, but I do think it's. I mean,
wait, you don't think I'm smart?
I don't know if you're. I mean,
Michael,
I didn't say you were dumb or smart, but I'm saying wisdom has nothing to do with that.
Yeah, okay.
You could be dumb as hell and super wise, I think. But I mean, having children is like studying humans for at least 18 years. So I think more and more I respect my elders, especially my parents who had 5 kids,
I mean, but that's assuming that you're actively studying the children. You're plenty of parents aren't aren't doing that.
I think you have to in some. I mean, maybe I have good parents, and maybe I assume as a parent I would be very attentive. But yes, of course, there's outliers. But I think I don't know. I just have respect for it.
Yeah, yeah.
If it's done well, I have respect for it.
Yeah, no question.
And the thing I have the most respect for is obviously now the artist-parent combination. To bring it full circle.
Well, you're welcome.
And that's it for the first episode of Blind Shovel with Jesse Fillingham. Music by Dori Bavarsky and Mingja Chen. Next week we've got Neve Bavarsky. See you then.